So we're going to move right along to the Southern Maine retail forecast with Karen Rich of Cardenti Real Estate.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks so much for having me today. I'm going to present the retail presentation looking back at 2017 and moving forward in 2018. So I usually like to start off by looking at some of the more common retail buzzwords. Some of those we'll be looking at as we move along in this. Omni-channel is one that's particularly become pretty common, as have click and collect and blended strategy. And we always talk about the numbers for retail, and it's no different this year. I did want to give a big shout out to Mark Malone and Marie Gressick at Malone Commercial Brokers. They compile a lot of this data every year, and they very generously share it with me so that I can present, and so that we have a continuity to the numbers, which I think is important for this conference. So we're going to start off by looking at the Greater Portland net absorption rate comparison of 2017 versus 2016. So we ended on 2016 with a net absorption rate of about 6,200 square feet. Conversely to that, at the end of 2017, we had a negative absorption rate of 104,000 square feet. That sounds, I think, more ominous than it really is. We always take a look at the vacancy rate by type of space and track that by four different sectors. So there's the power center, community center, strip center, and then the only freestanding retail that's considered for this are those freestanding buildings of over 10,000 square feet. At the end of the day, when we looked at all the average of this, we had a percent average of 5.07%, which is a slightly higher vacancy than it was at the end of 2016. We also took a look at the Greater Portland vacancy rate by town, and I think that this starts to tell a picture. So South Portland had the highest vacancy rate, followed by Portland. South Portland, frankly, because of the Maine Mall area. And then you have tiny Cape Elizabeth that has 0%. Westbrook and Scarborough are at 1.2%, and Falmouth actually was able to decrease its vacancy rate as well. This takes a look at the national numbers versus our local numbers. And you can see when you look at it nationally, they're at a much higher vacancy rate than us. But on the other hand, they were really pretty stable this year. There was basically no change. It went from 11.2 to 11.1%. Versus last year at the end of 2016, we were at a 3.4%. And this year, as I mentioned, we ended up at a 5.07%. And we're going to talk about why that was. So there were a couple major store closures that really contributed vastly to that, which are Bon-Ton at the Maine Mall, I think we all know closed, as did Sports Authority. And I included Olympia Sports in here only for downsizing. They're a company that's doing very well, but I'm noticing that they're starting to possibly close some of maybe their underperforming stores, which I think is what's happening generally across retail. So this slide, I think, is particularly telling as to what's been going on. So this looks at the large vacancies that we've been tracking for a multitude of years in 2016 versus 2017. So Falmouth Shopping Center has had this huge vacancy for as long as I can remember, when Shaw's moved down from one end of the center to the other end of the center, and there's been a 70,000 square foot vacancy there. That's gotten filled primarily, so there's less than 20,000 square feet available. Maine Mall is where you can see where the difference in our numbers are. They ended up in 2016 with only about 6,200 square feet, but at the end of 2017, they were almost 130,000 square feet of vacant space. The average lease rates also appear a little ominous, and I'm not reading too much into these. I think that it's something that needs to be tracked and looked at, obviously, year after year. But we did have a somewhat of a drastic drop when you look at averages. I don't feel like as a broker, I didn't really feel like the rates were coming down. But when you look at the averages at the end of the year, the average lease rates had for what was being tracked had come down almost 15%. So it's still a decent number of $15.11 a square foot, and typically those are triple net numbers. But in any event, it was over 17, close to 18 the year before that. This takes a look at some of the new franchises to Maine, which I think is always an exciting picture for us as Mainers to see everybody that's finding its way to Maine. In particular, Ocean State Job Lots has come here in a big way. They're going to be in Biddeford, and they're the ones that have taken up that big vacancy in Falmouth, former Shaw's, and they're moving in there along with Planet Fitness. Some of the other ones that have moved in to the Old Port are West Elm, Ramblers Way, Lululemon. So what's interesting is we talked about those vacancies at the Maine Mall, but fortunately they've already been able to release the Sports Authority space, and that's being released to Round One, which is an amusement and bowling type of venue, which I think will do really well at the Maine Mall. And Convenient MD is another franchise that's moved in there. They're occupying on Marginal Way. Simon Pierce, a beautiful new store on Commercial Street as well. Mainers love their restaurants, and that's absolutely true. And typically here in the next two slides, I've tracked a few of the restaurants that have moved in 2017. And I say a few because that's all it is, because there are so many new restaurants throughout Maine that you can't possibly, include all of them. But I think what's interesting is how Maine has evolved with restaurants. So within the last, I'm going to say 5 to 7 years, Portland has really become known as a foodie city. And what's happened, I think, is that everybody that's putting the restaurant in Portland really ups their game. They have great chefs. There's a lot of renowned chefs that are award-winning nationally. And I think what's happened is that that's really spread all over Maine now. So you're finding a lot of these people that maybe previously had restaurants in Portland are now going to some of the smaller towns outside of Portland. So if you're moving into Maine with a restaurant, I think you really need to have a great product. This tracks the Old Port and downtown Portland, and I did talk to Pete Harrington, who does a lot of the leasing in downtown, and I think we were talking about the fact that once Anthropology moved into Middle Street, it really opened up that whole Middle Street corridor for a number of local and national and regional retailers. So what happened this year is West Elm ended up buying the building, or somebody bought it and then leased to them. And we have Ramblers Way, restaurants, obviously, we've already talked about that. But I mentioned a few seconds ago about the lease rates and how they've come down. They certainly have not come down in the Old Port. We have Commercial Street lease rates that are in the $35 to $40 a square foot. 4th Street is in the $25 to $35 a square foot. And there are parts of Lower Exchange Street that are getting over $40 to $45 a square foot. So those don't show any sign of coming down in the near future, because in addition to that, we have basically a zero vacancy rate. So I think that that's important when we look at how well Portland is doing. The other thing is, I think next year we're going to be you're seeing a lot of development happen east of Franklin, Ontario. I think next year we're going to see maybe some more retail following suit with that as well. I always use this opportunity to take a look at some of the southern Maine retail and talk to some of the economic development directors in those towns to see what's going on in, outside of the greater Portland area. So in Freeport, it's got a vibrant retail economy going there. There hasn't been a ton of new retail that's moved in there. Maine Beer Company did expand, but they continue with their low vacancy rates. Falmouth, as I mentioned, they've been able to lease up that former Shaw's space to Ocean State Jobs Lot. Rivalry Sports Pub opened their second location, and Verizon came in and retrofitted the old Wendy's building on Route 1. So, and I know, I've been reading in the news recently about there are still some vacancies out there, and potentially some redevelopment is being hindered by some of the restrictions for development along there. But I would fully expect that within the next year, those spaces would get leased as well. The other towns I looked at were Biddeford and Saco. So Biddeford really has an interesting story this year. Biddeford, as we all know, in the last 10 years, Biddeford Crossing developed there on Route 111. They ended up having some issues during the recession. Market Basket came in and bought that, the company that owns Market Basket. And since the end of the recession, they've done really well there. And other kind of strip malls have popped up around them on Route 111. But what's also happened in Biddeford in 2017 is that we're seeing a lot of more downtown development. So as the mills are being developed for residential use and more hospitality and so on, we're seeing a lot of new restaurants move into downtown Biddeford, down in the Main Street area. So it's kind of exciting for Biddeford, I think, and it's going to be fun to track that over the next few years. York County Credit Union moved in there, as well as Bangor Savings Bank, and new Starbucks opened. In Saco, we didn't see a ton happen in retail there this year. I think they've continued with a fairly low vacancy rate. Main Street continues to prosper, but the big retail news in Saco this year was the first Krispy Kreme, and everybody's been psyched about that. This takes a look at some of the significant retail sale transactions. And remember, I'm only tracking this as far as Freeport, so there's not a ton that took place. I am missing one that I'll mention from this board. 740 Broadway sold for $4.1 million this year as well, and that was brokered by Joe Porta and Joe Malone. In addition, we have this 510 Alfred Street in Biddeford, the former Shaw's, sold for $3.925, and that was brokered by Derek Miller and Drew Sigfridson of the Bolus Company. Mallside Plaza, I think, very quietly sold for $16.5 million, and that was brokered by a Massachusetts broker. Sienna's Restaurant sold to Elsmore Barbecue, and that was handled by Sherry Bonowitz of my office and Mike Anderson of Malone. And John Gendron sold Rite Aid at 451 Main Street in Saco for just over $3 million. And then the former Crockett Furniture store closed in Gorham and reopened, I believe, as another furniture store, and that was handled by Jen Small and Joe Malone at Malone Commercial Brokers, and that sold for $2.2 million. This takes a look at some Portland developments that are going to be underway. One is that new development at the corner of Marginal Way and Franklin Arterial, that 11,000 square foot that has convenient MD. I've been told by the city that we've been carrying this Midtown development on our slides for quite a few years, and I'm told now that that is on hold indefinitely. And the parking garage is going to be built, though, however, in 2018. I think Thompson's Point, not a lot of expansion happened actually there in 2017. Some of it had taken place before then, but I think we're going to continue to see that expansion. And as well, as I mentioned, east of the Franklin Arterial, Ed Gardner, who owns Ocean Gate Plaza at 511 Congress Street, has added an event center there, and he's also going to be adding a parking garage there during 2018. So this takes a look at the one big new retail development that's on the Westbrook-Portland line, and it's 550,000 square feet. And I think we've all read in the news about Market Basket is going to have their second location there. Waterstone is bought the land and the approvals this year. And I thought this was fact, and now I found out perhaps it isn't after I already went to press with this, that Hobby Lobby and Starbucks have signed. I think that they have, but I can't guarantee that at this point. So I wanted to take a few minutes and talk a little bit about some of these top retail trends in 2017, and not retail trends locally, but they're being they're happening locally, but they're starting nationally. So one of the things I spoke about quite a few years ago was this omni-channel growth, and basically what that is the integrated growth on a number of channels that retailers are using to reach you, whether it's on your mobile app, their mobile app on your mobile phone, on their regular website, social media, personalized emails, or any number of ways they're reaching you. And why that's important to us that are looking at the bricks and mortar real estate is that it solidifies the importance of bricks and mortar retail. You know, a few years ago, I think we were all concerned, oh my gosh, is e-commerce really going to take the place of the physical stores? And I think what's clear when you really delve into it now is that's not going to happen. What is happening is that retailers are really being pushed to to give you the best customer service and the best customer experience, and to reach you on every channel that they can reach you. And you as the consumer are the beneficiary of that. So a few years ago, we were talking about showrooming, and what that is people go into, might go to Macy's and see what they have there, then come back and Google it and try to maybe get a better price for it. Now what's also become prevalent is web rooming. So people are now searching on their mobile apps or their laptops and seeing what they want to buy and then going out and purchasing it. Click and collect is another common term now, which is pretty self-evident what it is. So these people are ordering something online for whatever reason. They don't want to wait for shipping, or and they'll go and pick it up. And that's obviously been used a lot in recent years and is starting to become more and more prevalent with grocery stores. People are ordering online what they want, and then they're going to a designated location and picking up their groceries and never getting out of their car. So it's a combination of all of these channels that make for a successful retailer. I think a couple things that have happened in 17 that we're going to continue to see in 2018 is big box downsizing. I think some of these big boxes, when they have the opportunity, are downsizing their square footage of their store. That doesn't mean that they're not doing well, they just have reevaluated what they need for their prototype. The other thing I think that we're seeing, and we're already seeing this in Maine, is this closing of underperforming stores. For example, Macy's is closed in Bangor, but Macy's is doing fine, I believe, out at the Maine Mall. Sears has closed a number of their smaller stores, but they're doing fine by the Maine Mall. I think you're going to see that trend continue. The biggest thing, all the research that I did, and the biggest thing that I was reading about, is technology is going to play a bigger and bigger part in what the retailers do and how they reach us and how they provide us with our best customer experiences. So a few retail trends for 2018 that I think are kind of interesting. There's this, I found this one particularly fascinating. It's called augmented reality. And basically, it's being offered right now through some mobile apps. And you could go, I don't believe it's at this Sephora, but you could go to your local Sephora store, and every woman always has a hard time. What's the right color lipstick? So you don't want to, we all have 20 extra lipsticks that we bought and we don't like. And now they have a way that you can see electronically how that lipstick looks on your face without actually trying on the lipstick. And there's so many applications for this that I think it's going to play a big part in retail moving forward. Some other retail trends that I think we're going to see is, everyone's aware of Amazon purchasing Whole Foods. And obviously they're a giant, but I think that you're going to see a piece of that happening even with some of your smaller retailers. They do it, if you have a website, they might want to give a pop-up store during a certain part of the year, or they might want to offer their product in one of the major stores that does have a physical location close by. The other retail trend that I think we're going to see, which is somewhat surprising, is dollar stores were always known that they did well during a recession. And I think what's happened is that dollar stores have really reinvented themselves. So now they do well in an up economy. And the reason being for that is that they really have gone after the rural markets. And by going after the rural markets, they're able to provide them with items that, they may not have a Walmart. They may not have a big grocery store. So instead of just having the option of a convenience store, now they have a dollar store to shop in. So I can see that trend continuing. So those are a couple of the things. I have a very optimistic view of retail in Southern Maine. I think it's doing well. I think it's really interesting to track it, and I appreciate the opportunity to present. Thank you.